My daughter-in-law announced she was pregnant for the fourth time. But I was exhausted from raising her children as if they were my own. Then I left. But she called the police on me. And that's when everything unfolded. What I never imagined was that calling the police would be the beginning of the cruelest war I've experienced in my 67 years of life. I'm Eleanor, and for 6 never-ending years, I've been the real mother to 3 grandchildren, while their actual mother, Summer, lived as if she didn't have kids. When she gave me the news of the 4th pregnancy, something inside me snapped. It wasn't joy. It wasn't excitement. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, because I knew exactly what it meant. Another baby for me to raise while she kept hopping from party to party. It all started 6 years ago when my first grandchild was born. Summer was barely 23, and I thought it was normal for a first-time mother to need help. It will only be temporary. I kept telling myself it's normal for her to be nervous. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into an endless nightmare. Daniel, my son, worked morning until night to support his new family. So, the responsibility fell completely onto my shoulders. At first, it was just in the afternoons. Eleanor, can you watch the baby while I run to the grocery store? Then it turned into, Eleanor, I have a doctor's appointment. Can you keep him? And little by little, without me realizing it, I became the full-time nanny. Summer started going out with her friends on Friday nights, then Saturdays, too, then Sunday afternoons. She always had the perfect excuse, always a reason why she couldn't take care of her own child. When the second baby arrived 4 years ago, I was already trapped. Summer didn't even pretend she was going to change. She would arrive at my house at 8, 0 inches the morning, drop off the 2 kids, and disappear until night. I have things to do, she would tell me, as if raising her children wasn't one of those things. My days began at 6, 0 inches the morning, preparing breakfasts, changing diapers, and ended at 10 at night when I finally managed to put the little ones to bed. I spent my entire pension on them. Diapers, formula, clothes, toys, medicine when they got sick. I calculated once, and in those years I had spent more than $50,000 of my savings. Money I had saved for my old age, for my own needs, went directly to supporting the children of a woman who preferred to spend her money on new clothes and nights out in Los Angeles. The 3rd grandchild arrived 2 years ago, and by then I was no longer Eleanor, the affectionate grandmother. I was Eleanor, the household slave. 3 children under 6 running around my house yelling, fighting while I ran after them as if I were 20 years old again. My knees ached. My back was killing me, but there was no rest. Summer had turned my home in San Diego into her personal free daycare. The worst part was that she acted as if she were doing me a favor by letting me watch my grandchildren, as if I should be grateful for the opportunity to raise them. Never a genuine thank you. Never any recognition for everything I did. On the contrary, if I ever complained, she would reply, "But Eleanor, they're your grandkids. Don't you love them?" As if love meant I had to completely sacrifice my life for someone else's irresponsibility. My friends stopped inviting me to their get-togethers because I always had to decline. I can't. I have the kids. My social life completely vanished. I couldn't go to the doctor without taking 3 little ones with me. I couldn't go shopping without carrying strollers and diaper bags. I couldn't even take a nap in the afternoons because someone was always crying. Someone was hungry. Someone needed attention. And there she was at my doorstep with a radiant smile, stroking her barely bulging belly, telling me, "Eleanor, we have wonderful news. We're having another baby." As if it were the greatest blessing in the world. As if she didn't see the permanent dark circles under my eyes. As if she didn't notice that I had aged 10 years when I had only been in the last 6. At that moment, something inside me broke forever. I couldn't do it anymore. When Summer finished giving me the wonderful news of her 4th pregnancy, I stayed silent for several minutes. She kept talking excitedly about names, about how the other children would be happy to have another little sibling, about how blessed she felt. But I could only think of one thing. I just couldn't do it anymore. My body, my mind, my heart, everything was at its limit. "You're not excited, Eleanor?" she asked when she noticed my silence. "You're going to have another beautiful grandchild." And that's when I exploded. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told her with a calm I didn't recognize in myself, "Summer, I'm not going to watch this baby. I can't do it anymore." Her smile faded as if she had been slapped. "What do you mean you're not going to watch him? You're their grandmother," she replied. As if that was enough explanation for me to sacrifice another 3 years of my life. I explained to her that for 6 years I had raised her children while she lived like a single woman. That I had spent all my savings. That I had lost my health. That I no longer had a life of my own. But Summer wasn't listening. She just repeated over and over, "But they're your grandkids. Eleanor, you love them. Right? A grandmother who loves her grandchildren does anything for them." It was her favorite manipulation, turning my love for the children into an obligation to serve her forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I checked my finances again, and the reality was devastating. Of the $80,000 I had saved for my old age, I only had $28,000 left. I had spent $52,000 in 6 years raising the children of a woman who spent her money on designer clothes and dinners at expensive restaurants. While I was buying diapers with my pension, she was buying $300 handbags. The next day, Summer arrived as always at 8 sharp in the morning with the 3 children. But this time, I was waiting for her at the door. No, I told her simply. Not today. Her face contorted into a grimace of disbelief. What do you mean, no? I have important things to do. She always had important things to do. Going to the nail salon was important. Lunch with her friends was important. But raising her own children, that was never important. Well, you're going to have to do those important things with your children, I replied, because I'm not your free nanny anymore. Summer stood at my door for 10 minutes, waiting for me to change my mind, to open it as I always had. But for the first time in 6 years, I kept my door shut. That afternoon, I received 5 calls from my son. Daniel. Summer had run to tell him that his evil mother was refusing to watch her own grandchildren. Mom, what's wrong with you? Summer is crying. She says you won't help her with the kids. The word help cut me like a knife. Helping is something you do occasionally, not something that consumes your entire life. I explained to Daniel everything that had happened in those 6 years. How I had spent my money. How I had lost my health. How I hadn't had a single day off. But he just repeated the same thing as his wife. But Mom, they're your grandkids. Don't you love them? As if loving meant destroying myself for their convenience. Daniel, I told him, I love my grandchildren more than my own life, but I am not going to continue being a slave to a woman who doesn't want to be a mother. My son fell silent. I think for the first time in years, he really heard what I was telling him. But Summer wasn't going to give up so easily. Over the next week, she implemented her favorite strategy: emotional blackmail. She brought the children to my door every day. The kids cried, asking me to let them in as always. Grandma Eleanor, why don't you love us anymore? My heart broke every time. But I knew that if I gave in even once, we would be back in the same hellish cycle. Summer had told the children that Grandma Eleanor didn't love them anymore, which is why they couldn't play at my house. She was using my own grandchildren as emotional weapons against me. It was cruel and manipulative, but effective. Every time I saw their sad little faces pressed against my window, I felt like I was the villain in the story. On Friday of that week, Summer showed up at my door with a new strategy. She was accompanied by her sister, Martha, who started yelling at me as soon as she saw me. You're a horrible grandmother. How can you abandon these innocent children? Martha knew nothing of what I had lived through for 6 years, but she felt entitled to judge me. If you think it's so horrible for a grandmother not to watch her grandchildren, I replied, then you can watch them. Summer can bring them to your house every day. Martha immediately fell silent. It was easy to judge from the outside, but no one really wanted to take responsibility. That night, while I was having dinner alone in my house for the first time in 6 years, feeling that strange mix of freedom and guilt, the doorbell rang. It was 9 at night. I opened the door and there they were. 2 police officers with Summer standing behind them with a triumphant smile. "Ma'am Eleanor," the senior officer said to me, "we received a complaint of child neglect. This woman says you refuse to watch your grandchildren and that the children are in danger." My world stopped. Summer had called the police. She had gone so far as to involve the authorities because I refused to be her slave. "Officer," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "those children are not neglected. They are with their parents where they should be. I am the grandmother, not the mother. I have no legal obligation to care for someone else's children." But Summer had already prepared her version of events. According to her, I had been the primary caregiver for years and had now abruptly abandoned the children without explanation. The police officers explained that while there was nothing illegal about my decision, they wanted to make sure the children were okay. I had to show them messages, photos, any evidence that Summer was a negligent mother who had abused my kindness for years. When the officers left after confirming that the children were safe in their own home with their parents, Summer remained standing at my door. Her triumphant smile had disappeared. "This isn't going to end here. Eleanor," she told me in a cold voice I had never heard from her, "I'm going to show you who has the power here." And that's when I knew the war was just beginning. After that night with the police, I thought Summer would calm down and understand that she couldn't keep manipulating me. How naive I was. What followed were the 3 most hellish weeks of my life, where I discovered how far a person can go when they lose control over someone they had been exploiting for years. The day after the police visit, Summer implemented her new strategy: total siege. At 6:00 the morning, the messages started arriving on my phone. "Eleanor, the baby is crying and I don't know what to do. I need you to come over. Eleanor, I don't have money to buy formula. The children are going to starve. Eleanor, I'm pregnant and I feel sick. I can't watch 3 children alone." Each message was more dramatic than the last. According to Summer, if I didn't give in, the children would die of hunger. They would get sick. They would suffer psychological trauma. Everything was my fault for being a selfish grandmother who cared more about her comfort than her grandchildren's well-being. I received between 20 and 30 messages daily, all full of manipulation and emotional blackmail. But the worst part came when she started using the children as messengers. She sent them to knock on my door with little cards that read things like, "Grandma Eleanor, Mummy says you don't love us anymore. Is it true you don't want us?" Imagine the pain of reading those words written in the shaky handwriting of a 5-year-old child. Summer had turned my own grandchildren into soldiers in her psychological war against me. One afternoon, the 4-year-old showed up alone at my door, crying, "Grandma, Mummy says if you don't come watch us, Daddy is going to leave the house and we'll be left with no money." It was a lie. Of course. But how do you explain that to a 4-year-old? I hugged her. I comforted her. But I didn't open my door. I knew that if I did, we would be back in the same vicious circle. That night, I received a call from Daniel that broke my heart. "Mom, Summer is really bad. She cries all day. Says she can't handle the 3 kids alone. She's pregnant. She's stressed. The kids are suffering, too. They ask about you all the time." My son sounded desperate, exhausted. For the first time, he was realizing what I had been carrying for 6 years. "Daniel," I told him, "if Summer can't watch 3 children, why did she decide to have a 4th? If she's so overwhelmed, why did she never stay home to watch them herself all these years?" My son had no answers. He just repeated that he needed me to be understanding and help the family. But understanding had run out a long time ago. For 6 years, I was more than understanding. I was a saint. I understood when Summer needed time for herself. I understood when she went on a trip with friends, leaving me with sick children. I understood when she spent the diaper money on new shoes. I had no more understanding left to give. The following week, Summer escalated her campaign. She started calling all my relatives, telling them her distorted version of events. According to her, I had gone crazy overnight and had cruelly abandoned my grandchildren. She didn't mention the 6 years of exploitation. She didn't talk about all the money I had spent. She didn't talk about her constant outings while I raised her children. My sister-in-law, Laura, called me scandalized. "Eleanor, what is wrong with you? Summer told me you said you weren't going to watch the kids anymore. Those poor babies need you." When I tried to explain the real situation, she cut me off. "Don't give me excuses. A grandmother should always be there for her grandchildren." It was easy to judge from the comfort of her own home without having lived a single day of what I had lived. Other relatives started avoiding me. At family gatherings, I felt their looks of disapproval, their whispers behind my back. Summer had managed to paint me as the villain in the story. as an unnatural grandmother who had abandoned innocent children out of pure selfishness. But what truly devastated me was when my own sister Martha confronted me. Eleanor, you were always proud. But this is too much. Those children are not to blame for the problems between you and Summer. They need you. When I tried to explain everything I had been through, she told me, "We all have problems, Eleanor. But when it comes to children, you sacrifice." Sacrifice. Hadn't 6 years of my life been enough sacrifice? Hadn't $52,000 of my savings been enough sacrifice? Hadn't losing my health, my social life, my freedom been enough sacrifice? But no one wanted to hear that. They only wanted me to continue being the perfect grandmother who kept quiet and put up with everything. If this story touches you, please subscribe to the channel and share the video to help me grow and reach more people. Summer also started a campaign on social media. She posted photos of the children with sad faces and captions like, "When the people you love most turn their backs on you in the hardest moments, pregnant and alone. But God never abandons his children." She didn't mention my name directly, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Summer's friends started commenting on those posts with messages of support. "Oh, friend, how awful that your family isn't supporting you. The kids aren't to blame. May God forgive whoever is making them suffer. A true grandmother would never abandon her grandchildren." Each comment was like a stab in my heart. But the worst came when Summer decided to show up at my job. Yes, she went to the office where I worked part-time as a receptionist, bringing the 3 children in dirty clothes with faces that looked like they hadn't eaten breakfast. She sat in the waiting room and started crying dramatically while the children shouted, "We want Grandma Eleanor. My co-workers didn't know where to look." The scandal was such that my boss had to call me into his office. "Eleanor, I don't know what family problems you have, but you can't bring this drama into the workplace." I had to explain the whole situation, feeling the deepest humiliation of my life. A woman of 67 years having to justify why she didn't want to continue being exploited by her daughter-in-law. That night, when I got home after one of the most humiliating days of my life, I found Summer waiting for me at my door. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had a man in a suit with her who introduced himself as her lawyer. "Ma'am Eleanor," the lawyer told me in a professional but threatening voice, "my client has informed me that you have been providing childcare for years and have now abruptly abandoned that responsibility, putting the children at risk. We are considering filing charges for child abandonment and neglect of vulnerable persons." I felt as if the world was collapsing beneath my feet. Summer had not only called the police, not only destroyed my family and social reputation, but was now threatening to put me in jail for refusing to continue being her slave. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, "My client is concerned about your mental stability. The drastic change in your behavior suggests you might need a psychiatric evaluation. Summer smiled behind the lawyer. Her plan was perfect. If I didn't return to watch her children voluntarily, she was going to force me to do it through the courts or commit me to a psychiatric hospital. That night, alone in my house, I cried, as I hadn't cried in years. Not from sadness, but from rage. Rage for having allowed myself to be used for so long. Rage for having believed that family love justified any abuse. Rage for living in a world where a 6-7-year-old woman didn't have the right to say no without being crucified by the whole family. But in the midst of that darkness, something began to change inside me. It was no longer just exhaustion. I felt it was determination. If Summer wanted a war, she was going to get a war. But this time, I wasn't going to fight alone. After the visit from Summer's lawyer, I knew the time had come to stop being the silent victim. For 6 years, I had quietly endured everything, believing that was the proper way to handle family problems. But when someone threatens you with jail for refusing to be their slave, it's time to change the rules of the game. The next day, early in the morning, I went to the bank. For years, I had been giving money for the children's expenses without keeping records. It was time to get all my bank statements, all the transfers, all the withdrawals I had made to support Summer's children. The bank employee, an older woman like me, looked at me with compassion when I explained what I needed. "Oh, Ma Eleanor," she said as she printed page after page of bank movements. "My own daughter does the same thing to me. They use us as ATMs, and then they make us feel guilty if we protest." Her words comforted me. I wasn't the only woman in this situation. The numbers on paper were even more devastating than I remembered. In 6 years, I had spent exactly $54,600 on expenses related to my grandchildren: diapers, formula, clothes, shoes, medicine, toys, food, medical expenses. Everything documented, everything recorded. While Summer was buying $400 handbags, I was buying antibiotics for her children with my pension. After the bank, I went straight to an electronics store. If Summer wanted to play dirty, I could, too. I bought a small digital recorder. Every phone conversation, every visit to my house, every threat, everything would be recorded from now on. There would be no more my word against hers. That afternoon, like clockwork, Summer arrived with the children at my door. This time, I had the recorder turned on in my pocket. "Eleanor, I need you to help me today. The kids haven't eaten, and I don't have money to buy food." A total lie. The day before, I had seen her social media where she was showing off her lunch at an expensive restaurant with her friends in New York City. Summer, I told her calmly. Your children are your responsibility, not mine. If you don't have money to feed them, maybe you should consider looking for a job instead of having lunch at expensive restaurants. Her face fell apart. She didn't expect me to know about her outing the day before. That was a birthday gift from a friend. She yelled, I can't believe you're spying on me on social media instead of worrying about your grandchildren. Always the same tactic, turning herself into the victim when confronted with the truth. I'm not spying on anyone, I replied. But it's interesting that you have money for restaurants, but not for feeding your children. The recorder captured every word, every tone of voice. This conversation would serve me later. That night, I received an unexpected call. It was my neighbor, Brenda, a 62-year-old woman who lived 3 houses down. Eleanor, can we talk? I've been watching everything that's happening at your house, and I think you need to know you're not alone in this. The next day, Brenda came over for coffee and told me her own story. Her daughter had done the exact same thing for 4 years. She had turned her into a full-time nanny while she looked for work and went out partying. I spent my savings. I lost my health. And when I finally said enough, she accused me of not loving my granddaughter. I had to go to therapy to understand that saying no didn't make me a bad grandmother. Brenda put me in touch with other women in the neighborhood who had experienced similar situations. It was incredible to discover how many grandmothers were being exploited by irresponsible adult children. All of them had kept silent for years. All of them had felt guilty for wanting to reclaim their lives. Eleanor, Brenda told me. What Summer is doing has a name: economic and emotional elder abuse. It's not family love. It's pure and simple exploitation. I had never thought of it that way, but she was right. If a stranger had treated me the way Summer had treated me for 6 years, I would have called the police from day one. With the support of these women, I began to document everything systematically. Every time Summer showed up at my door, every threat, every manipulation, everything was recorded. I also started taking pictures of the time she dropped off the children and picked them up. Evidence that I was the de facto caregiver while she lived like a single woman. A week later, Summer showed up with a new strategy. This time, she was accompanied by a woman who introduced herself as a social worker. Ma'am Eleanor, we received an anonymous report about possible child neglect at this address. We need to inspect the living conditions of the children. My heart stopped for a moment, but then I remembered that the children didn't live with me. The children don't live here, I explained to the social worker. They live with their parents as they should. I am just the grandmother. Summer had lied again. She had told social services that the children lived with me to create more problems. The social worker apologized for the confusion and left. But Summer remained. I told you this wasn't going to end here. Eleanor. I can make your life impossible until you come back and watch my children. Her mask had completely fallen. She was no longer pretending it was about the children's well-being. It was pure vengeance for having lost her personal slave. Summer, I told her with a calm that surprised myself. You can bring all the lawyers, social workers, and police you want, but I'm not raising your children anymore. Find a daycare, hire a nanny, or better yet, stay home and be the mother you should have been from the beginning. Her response was predictable. You're a horrible grandmother. The children are going to grow up hating you for this. It was her last resort. The threat that I would lose my grandchildren's love. But Brenda had already prepared me for this. Children who grow up seeing their parents exploit their grandparents don't learn to love. They learn to use. You're doing them a favor by teaching them that boundaries exist. That night, as I reviewed all the evidence I had collected, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I was no longer alone in this battle. I had documentation. I had witnesses. I had emotional support. But above all, I had something I had lost for 6 years. My dignity back. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Mr. Davies, a lawyer specializing in elder rights whom Brenda had recommended to me. Ma'am, Eleanor, your neighbor told me about your situation. I'd like to offer you a free consultation. What you described constitutes economic and emotional abuse, and there are legal ways to protect yourself. For the first time in weeks, I smiled genuinely. Summer had made a mistake by involving lawyers and legal threats. She thought she would intimidate me and make me rush back to watch her children. But what she had accomplished was waking me up completely. If she wanted a legal battle, she was going to get one. But this time, I would have a lawyer, too. During the consultation with Mr. Davies, I learned that I had more rights than I imagined. Ma'am Eleanor, no grandmother has a legal obligation to watch her grandchildren. The fact that you did it voluntarily for years doesn't create any permanent legal responsibility. You have the right to change your mind whenever you wish. And the threats from her lawyer about child abandonment, I asked. Mr. Davies laughed. Pure intimidation with no legal basis. The children are not abandoned. They are with their parents. You never had legal custody, so you cannot be accused of abandonment. I left that office feeling as if I had recovered my power. For years, I had been led to believe that it was my obligation and to sacrifice my life for Summer's convenience. But it turned out the law was on my side. Love is not slavery. And being a grandmother doesn't mean giving up my rights as a human being. That night, I prepared my counterattack. If Summer wanted to play with lawyers and threats, I was going to teach her how to play that game correctly. With Mr. Davies as my attorney and all the documentation in order, it was time to go on the offensive. For 6 years, I had been reactive, always responding to Summer's demands and manipulations. But now, I had the tools to completely change the dynamic of this war she had started. Mr. Davies helped me draft a formal letter addressed to both Summer and her lawyer. In clear legal terms, it established that I had no obligation to provide childcare, that any future threats would be considered harassment, and that I had the right to request a restraining order if the harassment continued. The letter included copies of all my bank statements, evidence of the $54,600 I had spent, and recordings of the recent threats. Eleanor. Mr. Davies told me as we reviewed the document, "This letter is going to completely change the tone of the negotiations. Summer is going to realize that she's no longer dealing with a helpless victim, but with someone who knows her rights and is willing to defend them." The day we sent the letter, I also implemented other protective measures. I changed the locks on my house and installed a security system with cameras at the entrance. If Summer wanted to continue harassing me, everything would be recorded as additional evidence. I also informed my job about the situation and provided them with a photo of Summer so they wouldn't let her into the building. The response was immediate. 3 days later, Summer's lawyer called Mr. Davies asking for a meeting. "It looks like your letter scared them." Mr. Davies told me with a smile. "They want to negotiate." It was exactly what we had expected. Threats and intimidation only work against people who don't know their rights. But Summer wasn't going to give up so easily. When she realized that the legal tactics weren't working, she escalated to something much more personal and cruel. She started a systematic campaign to alienate my grandchildren from me, telling them that I had abandoned them because I didn't love them anymore. My oldest grandchild, who was 6 years old, found me at the supermarket one afternoon and asked me with tears in his eyes, "Grandma Eleanor, is it true that you don't love us anymore because Mummy is having another baby?" That moment broke my heart. Summer was using my own grandchildren as emotional weapons, damaging their psychological stability to try to manipulate me. I knelt down to his height and explained to him in simple words, "My love, I love you more than my own life, but Mummy needs to learn to take care of you herself. Like all mums do. I will always be your grandma who loves you. But I also need to take care of myself. It was hard to explain concepts like boundaries and manipulation to a 6-year-old. That night, I called Daniel and made it very clear what I thought about his wife's tactics. Daniel, if Summer keeps using the children as emotional weapons, I'm going to request that a child psychologist evaluate the damage she is causing them. No child should be manipulated that way. My son fell silent. I think he was finally beginning to see his wife's true character. Meanwhile, my support network continued to grow. Brenda introduced me to other grandmothers who had been through similar situations. And together we started a small support group that met on Wednesday afternoons. It was incredible to hear stories so similar to mine. Adult children who had turned their mothers into full-time nannies, who had exploited their maternal love until they were completely exhausted. What hurts me the most, a woman named Doris told me, is that my own daughter makes me feel guilty for wanting to have a life of my own at 70 years old. As if raising my own children wasn't enough. As if I now have to raise hers, too. We all nodded. That manufactured guilt was the most powerful weapon they used against us. The group helped me understand something fundamental. What I had lived through wasn't just a personal problem. It was a social pattern. There was a whole generation of older women being exploited by adult children who refused to take on their parental responsibilities. And all of us had kept silent for years, believing that was family love. 2 weeks after, I have to go to a notary tomorrow to sign some papers. It's a procedure for Jason's work. I need you to come with me as a witness. There it was. The moment they had been preparing. They were going to take me to sign the mortgage right in front of me, making me believe it was a work procedure. What kind of papers? I asked. And my voice came out calmer than I expected. Oh, I don't know exactly. Something about taxes. You know how those things are. Just boring paperwork. But they need a family member to be present. A lie. Everything was a lie. What time? I asked. At 11, 0 inches the morning. At the notary office on Main Street. Number 33, Jason's cousin's notary office. All right, I said. I'll be there. Chloe smiled. That triumphant smile I knew so well. Thanks, mother-in-law. I knew we could count on you. You're the best. We. I am ready to assist you with the next step in this story or with any other request you may have.